Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is an actor, stuntman, martial artist, and number one New York Times best-selling author, Wesley Chu. Welcome to Epic
What's up?
Realms. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little nervous right now.
Why?
It's
Why? There's
it's
no reason to be nervous. No reason to be
it's
nervous.
it's the live facet of this podcast.
It's
I just
it's what
realized.
makes it fun. It's what makes it fun. Although you don't really have to worry about the live aspect of the podcast, maybe until the live stream Q&A where the people that are live ask you some questions. So yeah, and we'll edit and post. Yeah, we'll edit and post.
Like, can we edit in
I
post?
can edit it and post. I can
Okay,
definitely
great.
do that.
Because one thing I realized ever since I was a kid is like I say a lot of dumb things. Like I have a very poor filter between my brain and my mouth. So it's usually not a big deal because I don't ever do anything live. Even when I was doing like acting, it was rarely ever live. So this is a different kind. This is a raw thing for me now.
Well, hopefully it's a good experience for you. And yeah, that's something that I always thought was kind of interesting was the fact that it's live and in the moment, yeah, it's live, but editing it in the background afterward and edit it in post is
Right.
super simple because I edit I edit ahs unless they're like super needed for the show. I usually try and edit those out. Like just now, I said ah. I'll probably edit that ah out, except for now
Would
that
you really? I mean,
yeah,
that's a very natural thing, though, isn't it?
it is. But if it's
I do that
not,
too now.
if
Shit.
it's
Now
if
I'm
it's
now I'm
over
self-conscious.
now, if it's overbearing, if it's like a lot,
Right.
that's usually when I'll do it. If it's part of a natural conversation, I don't necessarily do that. So, but yeah, as
Okay.
far as if you say something, I've had people come on and say, yeah, I didn't like XYZ uh, cover artist of my book, and I'm just making something up. And then after like, I didn't really mean to say that. Can you go back and cut that out? I'm like, yeah, sure, I can cut that out. Or when somebody dropped the name of a book that they weren't supposed to drop the name of yet, stuff like that. So yeah, we could totally edit that all out.
Okay.
No
Fantastic.
pressure.
Because okay.
So
All right. Let's do
speaking
this.
of, you said you did acting, and I listed this long list of things that you've accomplished. How did all these come about? Did they all like manifest as you were growing up? Like I'm going to be an actor and do martial arts and stuff.
Okay, so well, I mean, it all started with like one thing. Like, I mean, literally, if I look back in time, there are catalysts for each thing that kind of like led me to here. But I'm gonna go all the way back to the '80s when
Okay,
I was like
yeah,
4 years old. We just moved to this country. I lived in Nebraska at the time, and we just, if anybody who knows 1980s Nebraska, it's very flat, very white, very Midwest,
yeah.
and there weren't that many Asians in the states. So like I always joke that it was like there's like five Asians in the whole state, and like four were in my family. So I didn't have a deep connection with like my roots, my culture, my people.
Yeah.
And when I was like 5, 6 years old, I discovered something called Samurai Sunday, which is like really badly dubbed kung fu movies
Yeah.
that that they played on Sundays. And that's I kind of fell in love with that because it was like my connection to my home country.
Okay.
And it also gave me a really skewed view of what Asian people are like.
Right. Yeah.
But we all flew and punched through walls. So like from that point on, I always loved martial arts. And at the earliest opportunity, you know, I signed up to learn kung fu. Um, I was a voracious reader when I was a kid, but I could never find like kung fu books because that's what I loved.
Right.
So it all kind of like came together that way as I grew up, and I was by the time I was in my 20s, I was a huge martial artist. I was trained 20 hours a week. I was like on a lineage, and it was one of those things. And one day there was an independent filmmaker who came into the school looking for like basically extras, stuntmen who can like basically run, throw two punches and die.
Okay.
So he saw me work out, and then he liked my look, and he basically casted me with a speaking role. And that's kind of how I got started. But
Okay.
at that time I lived in Chicago, and anybody who knows Chicago's like acting industry, it's a lot of commercial work, a lot of industrials, some shows, but no real like live TV or film industry.
Right.
So I became an actor, did some stunt work, but it was primarily commercial work, small stuff here and there. And that's how I got into acting.
Okay. Nice. How did that bridge between doing acting and then eventually go into writing and, author work and stuff like that?
So they were simultaneous. I
Okay.
think to be honest, part of the catalyst for both was that I hated my day job. I just could not stand my day job. And at one point, like I said, I was working my day job. I'd go to the gym for like an hour to work out, and then I would train till like 10 p.m. every single night. And I think I was like 27, 28. One day I woke up and I was like, man, my life sucks. I got no friends. I'm hanging out with these old dudes all day. All week, I'm hanging out with these like 60-year-old dudes doing Tai Chi and stuff. What am I doing? And then I thought back to like what I wanted to do when I was young. When I was young, when I was 16 years old, my dad was an English professor. The reason why we moved to Nebraska was because he was getting his PhD in English.
Okay.
And so when I was 16, I went to my dad and I was like, Dad, I'm going to be an English major just like you. And I'm going to write books instead. And he was like, no, son, your life will suffer. So, and because he was the one that's paying for college, I did not become an English major. I became a computer science major, and then did a whole corporate route and yada yada yada. I hate my job.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like fast forward 10 years, I'm working now, and I just thought about like what made me happy, what did I want to do? And as much as I love martial arts, it was kind of like what are you gonna do with it? I'm gonna be one of these 60-year-old guys who's really, really good at martial arts, but doing the exact same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
So I just thought, no, I needed to make a change. I wanted to follow my dreams. And then that was when I literally just like quit martial arts. One day I like fell off the face of that school, um, never went back. And I started working on my first book. And the first book was a low fantasy. It was a really, really badly written book, which I finished it. It was a 180,000 word atrocity. It didn't go anywhere. And after a year, I, got drunk for a week and started working on the next book, which became my debut novel, The Lives of Tao.
Okay. When you were doing the other stuff before, did the actor, stuntman, martial artist combo, did that help out with any of your like writing works?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm known for my action scenes. Like if there are two things that Wesley Chu as the author is known for, I'm known for action scenes and like humor. And the humor comes from the acting. Like if it's there's like you don't see that much humor in speculative fiction,
Right.
and part of it's because it's hard. But another part of it, and this is just my theory, but is that to really get humor right, you really have to understand like human nature. You have to understand cadence. You have to understand timing, and that's something I learned as an actor.
Yeah.
Uh, but then when it comes to action, that's something that I had to kind of modulate. I mean, like if you read my early drafts, I would have like 5-page fight scenes. It was like complex. It was intricate. I was doing like John Wick. I was
Yeah.
writing John Wick, you know,
Every little
John Wick
detail.
for 15 minutes because when you do stunt work and you do fight choreography, um, timing, movement, placement matters. And if you don't, somebody's gonna get punched. One of my very first acting gigs was like I remember I'm doing this gig, I'm fighting like three guys, and it's like 3 a.m. because when you shoot in the middle of the night, everything's cheaper.
Yeah.
So we're shooting in the middle of the night, and like it was just one of those things where like when you throw, I was throwing a right elbow, and we did like 10 takes perfectly fine. And then on the martini shot, the very last take, just to make sure everything's fine. The guy's tired, I'm tired. I throw my right elbow, and the guy, instead of turning left, he kind of leans forward,
Ooh.
and I just cut his head open. So that was my first lesson about that. And like, it's one of those things you just got to get it right. So when I was writing it at first, I thought, okay, I was proud that I was writing these scenes that I could literally reenact. And the problem with that from a pro standpoint is that, it's boring. My wife was, read one of those early drafts and she was like, Wes, man, you're just mentally masturbating at this point, about these fight scenes. And she was right because, and especially when it comes to pros, action has to do a lot of heavy lifting to be effective. Not only should it be exciting, it should also move the plot along. It should
Yeah.
do character development. It should do world building. It should tell you so many things, not just about the people fighting, but also about like, the consequences of that action, how that just kind of pushes the characters into a certain space. And if a character coming out of a fight is exactly the same as he was before he got into the fight, then you don't even need a fight scene. So I mean, so a good action scene should do a lot of heavy lifting.
Right.
And that's something they had to learn along the ways, because it's one thing to be just like have cool scenes, but that tends to be a little flat.
Yeah.
It's another thing to really have it fully fleshed out, so that by the time a reader who doesn't even like action scenes could be like, whoa, that got my heart pumping, that got me racing, and now I want to see what happens next.
Yeah. And a lot of people do. They'll just throw a fight scene in for no reason other than to throw a fight scene in, and you're just, why?
Fight scenes are fun. Well, look,
Yeah.
like there are people who love sex scenes, okay?
Right.
And my point has always been, a good fight scene is like a good sex scene. They fulfill the same purpose on many levels, just it's in a different way.
Yeah.
I used to teach a workshop that I called a fight scene is a conversation with fists.
I love it. That's a great name.
So
Well, let's talk a little bit. We're talking about fighting. You talked about martial arts and that. How does something like, because you do kung fu, right? Mostly.
yes,
How does that? How
I
is
did.
that in reality versus
I
what
did.
we see? Because you mentioned, you used to watch the shows that had that.
Yeah.
What is the big like reality versus what pop culture shows us when it comes to kung fu and that style of or any martial arts for that matter?
So I mean, the reality is, like, an actual fight is the movements are always small. The movements you keep in front of you, and the movements tend to be boring. I mean, a good example is if you see like if you ever watch fencing, okay, like other than saber, fencing is just a lot of like feeling out in front of you, and that's what Chinese straight sword is. It's you're feeling the other opponent. You look for an opening, and then when one comes in, you kind of slide into it. You're not hacking, you're not slashing. It's always very small movements, and you want to keep the weapons in front of you. Okay, and that's the case with a lot of actual like sparring and fighting. It's not flashy. It's not
Right.
I mean, yeah, you can have big jump kicks and everything, but you have to kind of like set everything up.
Yeah.
And the reason why, like, if you look at kung fu forms, the reason why they're so flashy sometimes, it's because it's exaggerated movements. Because if you can do the exaggerated movement, you can do it effectively, a smaller movement when you actually fight.
Okay.
And part of those forms not only teach you the movement, it helps it train your flexibility, your strength. There's all these other aspects that they stack on top of it. And
Okay.
that's also, let's just be fairly honest. Back in the day, kung fu schools are just like any business, and when you have the flash, that's just marketing.
Right. Got to sell it.
You got to sell it, yeah.
Well, on that note, because I had read somewhere that you did some work with a rope dart.
Yes, that's my specialty.
And I think that it looks so cool. It looks really awesome. And displays, people that do displays with them is so fascinating. For those that don't know, you've got a rope and then it's not always a dart at the end, right? Sometimes it's like a weighted ball or something as well,
Well,
right?
it's a spearhead. It's usually a spearhead. Sometimes it's in like a weighted ball. It's called a meteor hammer.
Yeah. So how is that, again, it looks great. What about real world applications? If something happens, like, is that a real world application or is it mostly just muscle training, hand-eye coordination and stuff like that?
Look, there's probably some real world applications for the rope dart, but honestly, not really.
Okay.
I picked it because it was cool. I picked it
It is
because it was
cool. Yeah.
rare and it was a very technical weapon. I mean, a more realistic thing would be like, say, the whip chain. The whip chain is, it's a 5-foot rope with a chained links that are kind of like with sharp edges. Okay, and it's not realistic now, but like one of the things that that I focus on is like, if I ever get into a real fight, and it's been like 20 years since I've been in a real fight, but like it's like being able to pull your belt out.
Yeah.
I can effectively fight with a belt. And it's not hard, but it's also more than just whipping somebody with it. You
Right.
gotta. It's about timing. It's about distance, because you're not hitting them with just the whole belt. You're hitting them with the ends of
The
the
end
belt.
of it. Yeah.
Right. So there's some training and timing and just kind of knowing what you're doing in, involved with when you try to use one of those weapons. But realistically, unless you're fighting somebody who knows what they're doing, none of these fights last more than 1 or 2 hits.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go back to your first novel. You mentioned it.
Okay.
I was like, I had these things that popped in my head. It's like, well, there's some martial arts questions I want that I just think you would have awesome answers to. Back to your first novel. You said you that was your, after you did the other one, you came up with this. You started writing it. How did that really come to be, as far as getting published? Did you have to like shop it around, or did you just know somebody? Kind of how did that come about, and how did you get your foot in the door with that book?
So I finished the first draft of The Lives of Tao in 2007. And then I trunked it for 3 years because I was raiding World of Warcraft. I was a raid leader,
Okay,
as you
yeah,
do,
yeah.
you do. And then again, back to the whole like, what am I doing with my life thing? 3 years
Yeah.
later, my dude was like decked in like epic loots. But like, I was like, what am I doing with myself? So I went back to the what did I want to do with my life, and I thought about the book, and I polished it up, I rewrote it, and then I entered it into the Angry Robot Books open submission of 2013, or is it 2012?
Okay.
2012. So in the month of April, anyone can submit to them, and they were a very reputable small press in the UK, and they received 995 submissions for that, and out of those 995, they requested 65 partials, 25 fulls, and out of those, 5 people got book deals, and I was one of those 5.
Which is
So
awesome.
it's basically the hardest way you can get published.
Yeah.
I mean, going that route is actually worse than like going through the slush pile. But it worked. It worked, and I got my book deal, and because of that book deal, I got my agent, and since then, we've been off to the races.
Yeah. What about bouncing between different publishers? Right? Because obviously you've got your current stuff is coming out with Del Rey, right? Or Penguin,
Correct.
one of
Correct.
those two.
Yeah.
And how do you go from one to the other? Does your agent just say like, we're going to shop your book here? Is it over here? Or because they're like, maybe they're a little thematically different?
I think, I mean, so everything's by contracts. I signed a 2 book deal with Angry Robot Books back in 2012, and then that was a very successful book for them. So they wanted me for one more book to finish a series, which I did, and then they wanted me for 3 more books, which I signed a contract for, which became the IO books. And at the time, right when you're, no matter how successful you are in a small press, at the end of the day, that's still a small press.
Right.
And there are many advantages with being part of a small press. You come out, they are very nimble. They can publish you quickly. They can do a lot of things in a way that a larger press can't maneuver around. The
Right.
problem though is they are small press, which means your advances are lower, and they just they don't have the marketing budget to really push you out. They can launch you, but they can't really like hit you to a very high level.
Right. You can only
So
go so far.
I mean, look, the Lives of Tao did extraordinary, like, really punched above its weight. And to be honest, Angry Robot Books did punch above their weight also. So, but upon finishing my Tao and IO books, I wanted to go to a big 5, and that became Tor, which published my Time Salvager books.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, everything's by contract. So I finished my contract with Tor, and then I had some tie-in opportunities fall into my lap, which is the Cassandra Clare books, the Aldous Tursa series with Cassie for their Shadowhunter series,
Yeah.
and then with the Walking Dead book with Robert Kirkman's. Robert Kirkman asked me to write a Walking Dead book for Asia, and those were all published by Simon and Schuster. So that's just kind of how that happened.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, after doing 3 tie-in books, I was like, okay, I am now ready to do my own thing again, and that became the Art of Prophecy.
Okay. When you were publishing that first series of book, did you have a goal in mind for that story? Like, was there like, I need to tell this story, I need to represent this thing, I need to get this emotion out of people when you were writing that, or was it just like, I want to write a story and I want to tell a good story?
Oh, the Lives of Tao.
Yeah.
Oh, so the Lives of Tao is kind of like, so the idea for Lives of Tao came from my alarm clock. Where like because I'd wake up early in the morning to go work out, and it used to like, it's like that same alarm clock everybody else in the world had.
Yeah.
back in
Yeah.
like the 90s,
Yeah.
And like I had a lot of lucid dreams. I think at the time I might have been on Chantix to quit smoking.
Okay.
And when you're on Chantix, you have these really crazy dreams. So yeah, so I just had a dream about like this voice in my head being my life coach, kind of like, because I was going through this time period where like I don't like what I'm doing with my life. I feel like I'm on the wrong track with what I'm doing. Um, how do I pivot? What do I do? How do I find things that interest me? How do I find a career that I love? So that kind of was like the catalyst for, because if you ever read The Lives of Tao, The Lives of Tao is about an alien who inhabits kind of this out of shape loser's like body. Okay.
Right.
And then the alien can communicate with the guy. The main character is Rowan Tan, but he can't control him. So it has to be a very symbiotic relationship. So the alien, his name is Tao. He basically becomes Rowan Tan's life coach.
Yeah.
Teaches him how to like, teaches him how to fight, teaches him how to shoot a gun, teaches him how to like how to date, how to like clean up after himself. He's kind of a slob. So in many ways, I always viewed Rowan Tan's journey from this like out of shape schlub becoming like this secret agent spy
Yeah.
as my own writing career, going from my old corporate day job to becoming what I actually want to do with my life, which is becoming a novelist.
Awesome. Um, so this book comes out, right? It comes out, and you talked about like what comes to follow, how you got into the other books and stuff like that. Were people coming to you from other places or and being like, "Hey, I want you to do a story about this," or was it just like, "We want you to just do a book, do whatever you want"?
I mean, I've been asked to write anthologies. No, I get that on a regular basis, but generally, and then early on, like, look, I get asked to do tie-ins quite a bit too. Do you want to write an aliens book? Do you want to write a book for Warhammer? Do you want to write, and no, do you want to write a Marvel book? And I usually say no. Um, and that's more of a business decision than anything else.
Okay.
Like when you write tie-in, when you write for Star Wars, when you write for Marvel, they will pay you an upfront cost, upfront fee, and then they'll get you maybe 1% on the back end, but usually there's very little back end, if not any back end.
Right.
So you whatever you get on the upfront fee is what you get, you know. But when you write for yourself and you write for your own IP, you are the owner of that IP, which means you not only get you know that the contract money for that series, you get all the foreign rights, you
Yeah.
keep the audiobook rights, and most importantly, for me, you keep your film and television rights. And for me, I write in a generally very cinematic style,
Yeah.
so a lot of my IPs tend to get optioned. Everything's actually optioned right now.
Yeah. I definitely want to talk about that. I have that on my list because I think that was fascinating when I saw all of that. It's like this is pretty much all of his stuff is been optioned out. It's like that is ridiculous. And you don't see that a lot. So that's super cool.
I'm lucky. I will say that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that too. Especially
Was
considering your past, you know.
well,
So
you know what? Look, I was not a good actor. I'm gonna admit that right now. Okay, at one point, here's the thing about acting is like you really have to love it to get good. You really have to like dive into the craft to really make a living out of it. And at one point, I thought about moving to LA early on in my acting career, but I was like, you know what? When it came to the moment where like this is the go no go point. Are we gonna do this or not? And I remember I sat down for like 2 days and I was like, I really don't like acting that much. I fell into it because of the stunt work,
yeah.
and I fell into it because in Chicago, big commercial town, I mean, commercials are very easy money. If you can book it, it's easy money.
Okay.
And for the longest time, I survived by being the token Asian guy. And I hate to admit it, but like when you feel, especially back in the early 2000s, when diversity was not a real big thing,
Yeah.
when you film a commercial back then, you want the token white guy, the token black guy, token Asian guy, token fat guy. It's like they want to kind of fill these categories so that it feels like we're being inclusive.
Yeah.
So, and like they're like, if every other Asian actor is like my parents, they didn't want you to be an actor. So there weren't that many of us. There weren't that many Asian dudes. There were like 5 dudes that we all fought for the same roles.
Yeah. Yeah. That's gotta be rough.
Oh no, it's great. You don't understand.
Okay.
There are a lot of good okay, there are a lot of good actors out there, and most of them are white, just because of the way there's just whatever.
Yeah.
So if I had to compete against all those guys, I would get crushed.
Okay.
So in this way, it benefited me being that token,
Yeah.
and because the truth is, I wasn't a great actor.
Okay. And
Not gonna lie.
it takes a lot. It takes a lot to be able to say that about oneself as well. About any career at all. So when there's somebody's
Well,
like, "It is what it is," I know, but hey, that's
I mean, it's been 25 years. What I mean,
right. Let's talk about Cassandra Clare. You did some work with her.
I did.
How did the two of you meet up? Did you know each other, or did somebody else put you two together? How did that come about, that story? Because and also on top of that, for those that don't know, like, she was already a #1 New York Times bestselling author, before you two started to work out. So how did you two get fit together? Where were you on the standings when that started, and how did you feel about it?
So, so it all kind of started back in 2012. There's a bunch of literary conventions I was attending, and I just happened to go to a convention called World Fantasy in Brighton that year, which is in the UK. And I met a woman named Holly Black, and we just became really good friends. And we hung out, we got drunk, we drank, we partied that night. And then 3 years later, when Cassie's publisher wanted to publish a series on one of her like most popular characters, this half Asian warlock named Magnus Spain. Um, they wanted somebody who kind of who could write humor, who had a background that would kind of work with the character, and my name came on the short list. So at that time, Cassie didn't really know who I was,
Okay.
but she's best friends with Holly Black.
Okay.
So Holly went to bat for me. She was like, I know Wes, he can do this project, he'll be great for it. And then Cassie read my books after that and said, okay, this guy gets it, he can do it, and let's go.
Nice. How did they
So I
approach
mean,
you? Did they just come to you? Did Holly come to you, or?
everything's done through through the publisher,
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
agent. It's all on channels above my pay grade.
Wrap up your pig.
Everything's above my pay grade. Let's just be honest.
Did you know of her beforehand?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no, I read her books. I was a huge fan. It's like the Shadow Hunter books. I mean, they they were on the forefront of this huge YA explosion, and
Yeah.
like there's so many things in that it's such a huge, fascinating world. The characters, the history, the family trees are so complex and interesting that like there's so many stories you can kind of like mine from those, just because it's such a vast world. And and the more books Cassie wrote, the just the more cool things you can do with it. It was in many ways a dream project. I learned so much from working on that project.
Yeah.
Anything from like writing romance to writing sex scenes to just like showing how good character relationships can kind of like elevate a story.
Yeah, for sure. What was the process between you guys? Was it like you take a chapter, she takes a chapter, or like she just writes it until she needs you and then says, "Hey, can you do this?" How did that work? It's different for everybody that teams up like that.
Right. I mean, there was no set process. So there's some stuff, things I wrote, some things she wrote, some things we collaborated on. Like there were some characters that I created specifically. The Shinyan character is my creation, who I actually named after my wife. That's her Korean name. And then like in the sequel, the Lost Book of the White, the world is set in Shanghai, or the story is set in Shanghai, and so I had a lot to do with kind of like kind of plotting out that narrative there. And the Chinese shadow hunter Ke Tian, he does a rope dart, and like I was the one, I wanted to give him a rope dart as his weapon. So that was kind of like my thing there. So I mean, definitely at the end of the day, I think no, we didn't have set assigned roles. Cassie obviously made sure the flavor of the motivations and the style of the characters are the shadow hunter voices. But it was a very organic process.
Nice. Do you guys plan on doing more works together down the road?
I'm not sure. So I mean, right now, Cassie and I both have books coming out tomorrow. So she is
Yeah.
working on Swordcatcher. That's coming out tomorrow. I'm really excited about that. After I did the Cassie books, the first two Cassie books, and then did the Walking Dead book, I was, I think it was like early 2019. I was like, you know what? I had to get back to doing my own thing.
Yeah.
I've had the idea for the War Art Saga, which is the series for the Art of Prophecy, back in like 2015. And,
Yeah.
and at the time, I was like, I didn't think I was ready for it. I was writing science fiction, not fantasy, and that idea just kind of sat in my head for 4 or 5 years, kind of simmered and kind of like
Yeah.
grew on its own until finally, after I cleared out my plate, I was like, okay, now I am ready to write, the War Saga. And then, so I mean, I like doing my own things. I think, there are advantages with writing tie-in, but but writing your own thing is just like, it's yours. You are the god of this universe.
Yeah. Do you do outlines, or do you kind of seat of your pants it? What's your process like when you're putting together a book like this one?
I am a very heavy outliner, and it is hard to to pants, you know, a 250,000 word book. I
Yeah.
mean, it can be done. I know people who do it, but it is hard because especially if you're writing multiple point of views, you kind of have to like, I always consider writing big books like putting together a puzzle.
Yeah.
So for me, I usually have a pretty significant outline before I start writing. Or at least early on I did. Now things are a little bit more different. I'm a big believer in giving my characters free will. I want them to make choices on their own. And there are many times when I have an outline plotted out where I want this character to go through this door, but he's standing at the door and he's like, I don't want to go in. I just don't want to do it. I'm gonna go get some ice cream, whatever. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go watch a movie. And like part of me is like, you gotta go through the door. But he doesn't want to do it. And yeah, I could make him go through the door. I am God. I can make him go through the door. But there's a reason why he doesn't want to go through the door. Okay. And for me to force him through the door doesn't feel authentic, doesn't feel honest.
Yeah.
And so then part of it is this. Then you go back and say, okay, why does he want to go through the door? What happened throughout this character that makes him not want to go through the door? Or maybe this door is the wrong thing. Maybe you're trying to play God, but you're not, now that your character has experienced all these things leading up to this point, he has an honest, instinctive reason to not go through that door. And at this point, especially these days, I kind of want to honor that. You don't want to go through the door, fine, fuck it. You don't have to go through the door. However, instead of trying to retcon everything, what I do now is I just re-outline. I'll re-outline and see if I can get back to where I needed him to go, or I just go a whole different direction. Because as long as the decision making process for my characters feels honest to me, then I know she'd feel honest to the reader.
Yeah.
And what happens is now when I write a big book, by the time I finish the whole book, I'm on like outline version like 9.5 or
Okay.
9.8. So I'm always re-outlining to the point where these days now, instead of outlining the entire damn book, I'll outline like an act or a third of it. That way I'm I don't have to like redo all this work every
Yeah.
single time. So I'll get to this point, and this allows me as the writer to still discover things.
Yeah.
One of the cool things about pantsing is that you're always discovering new things. I don't pre-plot my worlds. Like I don't do world building. Like I don't sit down for like 2 months ahead of time and be like, all right, let's craft this world out.
Yeah.
For me, I like to sit down and kind of like almost like playing a first like a role playing game. I'm discovering the world as my character moves around,
Right.
and then I see the cool things that they see, and then I kind of like retcon that, saying, since people don't exist in a universe in isolation, how does what they see affect them culturally, physically? If if they live in a moon colony and every time they jump 15 feet or whatever, how does that affect how they grow up? How does
Right.
that affect the games they play? So there's all these cool things you can do if you let yourself discover these things instead of creating a world first and then plopping your guys into it.
What was world building like for your Art of Prophecy series? Was that an easy thing to do for you?
That's fun. That's the funnest part. Like, don't get me wrong. I get why people love world building. World building is fun. Um, so it's like, you know, like the only idea I really had for the art of prophecy in terms of like world building, you know, early on was like the idea of the grass sea, you know, having this huge jungle of like of land you know, floating on this ocean, and then so the land moves. All there, no, all the weeds are 3 stories tall, no, are 3 stories tall,
Right.
and it just the idea was it kind of grabbed me, and I'm like, well, if that is the case, how do people live in there? How do they travel? What do they
Yeah.
eat? What happens if they fall into what if they fall into a pond? What happens then? You know, so that was the only real like, you know, idea I started out with that I really wanted to use, and everything else became like a discovery process. One thing I did do before I started writing was I played a lot of Total War, Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
Okay.
That kind of set my mind for that for the whole like you know secondary world, you know,
Yeah.
China. So that were like my two things that kind of helped me build things out.
You want to tell our audience a little bit about what the art of prophecy, what the story concept is of it?
All right, so I suck at hand selling, so
That's okay.
I'm gonna ramble a little bit, but
That's hey, I love
so
rambling. I love
but the art of
rambling.
prophecy, basically, 500 years ago, there was this huge prophecy about you know about how a chosen one will rise and defeat this evil Khan and will save the world. Okay, it's
Okay.
a very like straightforward chosen one kind of prophecy. And you know, 20 years ago, they find this chosen one, this baby who they will now raise to become this great hero. So the five dukes of this, the five yeah duchies of this world come together and finally have peace, and they raise this guy, put all the resources into like raising this kid who will save them. And then when the story starts, there's a grandmaster named Ling Tai Shi who will kind of she's checking up on this kid, seeing how he's doing. And she goes to make sure that you know his training is going well. He's going to be a great martial artist or great war artist, as they call him. And she discovers that he sucks. He's spoiled. He doesn't know how to fight very well. He's been handled with kid gloves, so he's
Right.
kind of soft and he's weak and he's whiny. All these things. So she's like, "We're screwed." So she decides to take over his training
Okay.
and become his new master because she's one of the greatest war artists of her generation. At the same time, this great eternal Khan, this god king of you know that Jin, the main the kid is supposed to kill, gets naked and drunk, and some like foot soldier stabs him into the gut and he dies.
Okay.
So so
Plot
right there
twist.
and then what?
Plot
That's on
twist.
chapter three. So that's on chapter three. So I'm not giving any real
Right. Right.
spoilers
Right.
here. So the Khan's dead. The prophecy now, which they had an entire religion built around this thing, is basically broken. You know, it's like, what if you find proof that like you know like Jesus is like you know like never existed or whatever? But basically,
Right.
what do you do with the land, with the people, with the culture, if everything you known about it that you kind of worked together for has been proven to be a lie?
Yeah.
So from that point on, you know, the five dukes of this kingdom are like, shoot, man, we've been spending 12% of our GDP every year on this kid, and what do we get for it? You know, and then they're like, wait a minute, who's gonna get him now? Because he's still a political powerhouse. He's a liability now, but
Right.
he's still, you know, the prophesied hero of the TND. So they try to kill him. They're like, we're gonna cut our losses and kill him. So at that point, Taishi, who's kind of you know, grown attached to the kid, saves him, and they go on the run.
Okay.
That kind of big, and that's the setup for the story. Is
All
like,
right.
what happens when prophecy is broken? What happens politically, economically? You know,
Yeah.
and also and at the same time, you know, the art of prophecy follows three women, and one of them is this the shadow kill. Not sorry. She's a viper strike from the grass sea. She's one of the Mongolian people who were just subjugated by like you know Jin's people. So she's on the other side of the spectrum, you know, trying to fulfill her destiny. And her destiny after her Khan, that you know, that God King died, is to die. She is supposed to go like basically kill herself.
Wow.
And then, but then she was like, my people are enslaved. My sister is like missing. I'm gonna go find her. Screw this. So there's this chain reaction of things that happen because what everybody's expectations are for prophecy no, it's not flip on its head.
That's awesome. That's super cool. And the next book comes out tomorrow. Book 2, everybody, comes out tomorrow. So you definitely want to check that out. Book 1
Art
is
of
called The Art
Destiny.
of Prophecy, and the second book is The Art of Destiny, correct?
That's correct.
And that'll be come out tomorrow, October 10th. So if you're listening to this podcast, it would be today because we're recording it the day before.
Oh,
So
excellent.
there you go. So how much of your martial arts background and stuff goes into this story? Is it comparable to some of your previous works? Is there a lot of like, let's get combat in there? Obviously, you talked about he's being trained and stuff like that.
I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Like there are people who there's just been people who be like, I don't understand how your magic system works.
Right.
I don't understand this whole thing about Jing and how like you create magic out from your body. And if I was to take it a step back, I'd be like, honestly, my entire magic system is based off of Tai Chi. The
Yeah.
idea of Tai Chi, the idea of Fa Jing. Did you ever play any sports when you were a
Yes.
kid? What did you
Yes.
play?
I did track and field. I did uh, like soccer. I did all kinds of stuff. I also grew up.
Okay.
I did professional wrestling for a number of years as well.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, I mean, okay. So as a professional wrestler, okay, and basically you are you're using integrated body movements.
mm-hmm.
So when you pounce, your whole body is pouncing. Okay. When a tiger pounces, their whole body is basically lunging together, right?
Yeah.
When you swing a baseball bat, you don't swing a baseball bat with your arms. You swing
Right.
it with almost your feet. Your
Yeah.
whole
Your
body's
legs.
into that swing,
Your
right?
legs, your feet, your hips. Yeah.
Everything, right? And your feet are almost like spearing the ground when you make that swing, because that's what that kinetic energy moving from the ground through your body into the bat.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Tai Chi is. Like
Right.
all that stuff they do with Tai Chi, the slow movements or the forms, all they're doing is training you how to move kinetic energy from one end of the body to the other one. Okay. Bruce Lee's 1 inch punch, all that is relax your body. And at the exact same time, you swing that baseball bat, your whole body kind of tightens and hardens, and
Yeah.
that generates the power. That's Jing. And then all I do is take that concept and turn it into a magical world like wuxia, where like suddenly you can fly with it, you can punch through walls, you can do all these magical things with it,
Yeah.
because suddenly that power that you have can now turn into some kind of like physical magic.
Which is awesome. And for those that don't know, the book series is kind of a high fantasy sort of world, right?
Yes.
Nice. Those are some of my favorite types of books, by the way. a lot of our audience loves that kind of stuff, so I can't imagine them not going and picking up the new book and the old one, and your other stuff as well. So that's
Thank you.
awesome. Hopefully they'll go and pick that up. You have some you talked about getting optioned for stuff. Can you talk about any of that for any of your stuff?
Not really, to be honest.
Okay.
From a very high level. So the thing about options is you always want to be like, you want to be careful what you say. You're allowed to make certain announcements. And I got in trouble once.
Yeah. Don't say something if you're not supposed to. You can say
I got in
stay
trouble once
tuned.
a long time ago when this is like 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure no one's gonna be mad at me now, but
Okay.
like when like one of my books, Time Salvager, was optioned by Michael Bay.
Yes.
And this is back during when Transformers was huge, just like
Right.
2015. The Transformers was all over the place, so that was kind of a big deal. And they actually made their own announcement. The Deadline had the announcement saying, Wesley Chu's Time Salvager, optioned by Michael Bay. So that was public news. All I did was say, "Hey guys, I'm really excited. Blah blah blah. That's gonna be awesome. The team is great." And all I did was like a blog post about that. Back when blogging was a thing.
Yeah.
I got in so much trouble, man. It's just and part of it is just like they want you they want to kind of like manage how the information gets put out,
Right.
especially when there's just big talent attached to it. So generally there's a lot of option news that you're allowed to make that you just got to be careful about.
Yeah.
So right now all of my properties are in development at some level.
Excellent. Excellent.
With different studios and
Different people,
everything.
yeah.
And it's going through the process.
Do you I'm not going to get any specific, but do you get any, have you made it so you have any like input? Because I know sometimes other authors, they're like, I'm on site, or they're the new Percy Jackson, like he's there,
Right.
during the filming and has kind of hands on. Are you going to try to do any of that? Do you want anything to do that, or are you just like, nope, I trust you guys to do whatever?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
The thing is, the thing about options is like, and this is something I learned along the ways is that as the source, I have I'm the ultimate knowledge base for this IP.
Hmm.
But I also recognize that once it's been optioned and they have a showrunner, they have a director, they have a screenwriter writing something, it is now a shared world.
Yeah.
Okay. And what works in my head, what works on in long form prose on a book, isn't always going to work on the big screen or TV or anything else.
Yeah.
And they have limitations that I don't have as a writer. I can blow up $10 billion worth of stuff on the page and it doesn't matter. But they gotta manage that. They
Right.
have to be able to manage what they put on screen because that stuff is expensive.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it. But there's also the aspect of like um it's a different medium. So I don't know what I don't know and I don't know what works. And there are so many rules that I'm not even privy to. So when I approach working with somebody else, I don't just view it as like, okay, who can give me the most money, who can do whatever. It's you know, I'm specifically these days now look at the team.
Yeah.
I go, who are who's the producer, who's the showrunner, who this director they're going to bring on board, and then I try to be a good resource. Okay. Because if somebody wants to cut you out from that, once they option it, they have control over many aspects of it. If they want to cut you out, they can.
Yeah.
That's unless you're so big, that you're like, I will, you cannot cut me out. They can do that from a contractual standpoint.
Right.
So my thing has always been, I want to be a good resource. So the showrunner for like, the War Art Saga, we're friends. We've become friends, and we work together sometimes. And there would be days where he would call me, and he's like, "Well, I'm trying to work through this idea. What do you think about this angle? What do you think about this character? How would they, how would they interact if we did it this way?"
Right.
And then I'd be like, and things like some of his ideas are awesome. Some of
Yeah.
his ideas are much better than what I could have come up with. So we collaborate. We kind of like
That's
we,
great.
we work as a team.
Yeah.
And there's been times where he calls me and he's all pissed off because he's like, they're gonna do this and I'm not happy about this. So what do you think about that? And I'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
hold up. Let's take a step back and let's see what are the consequences of this? How do
Yeah.
we
Let's think
adjust to
about
it?
it.
And what are the benefits of it? So it's been cool that way because once you have that kind of relationship, I actually can provide more feedback because they're more receptive to listening to it. So
Yeah.
I like kind of having like using like soft gloves.
Yeah. Do you have that kind of same interaction with like your audiobook narrators?
Well, so I've been fairly lucky with my partnerships in my publishing career. So right now for Art of Prophecy, Natalie Naudus is the narrator. She's amazing. She's just, I mean, we won an Earphone Award for it.
Yeah.
We were nominated for an Audio Award, which is like the audiobook version of the
Yeah.
Emmys.
Yeah.
And when we were choosing audiobook narrators, she I pushed for her really, really hard. And part of it was because like the way she works in the middle of the night. She doesn't like having a producer with her because of the way she works. And the 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 publisher wanted a producer with her. So I really had to push to kind of like get her, to get her because I knew she'd be great for the job.
Right.
So we've become friends since.
That's great.
And obviously she'll send me like she'll be like, Wes, how do you say this? Or like this name is impronounceable. And I'd be like, sorry. I I don't put a lot of stock in names sometimes. So like sometimes when I have a minor character, I just be like, his name is like, I don't know, roll my fist on the keyboard and see what happens.
Love it. That's
so,
great.
so like, yeah. So it's one of those things where like, Yes, I don't make her life easy, but again, it's a partnership thing. I have a good relationship with the cover artist, Tran Nguyen. I think
Okay.
she did an amazing job. She they solicited feedback from me, they listened to me, and like I would say I'm friends with Tran, I'm friends with Natalie. I'm friends with most of the major players in to help produce my work.
Yeah.
And it's been great that way.
That's amazing. That's great. I love hearing that because you never know. Sometimes it's like, no, we don't talk to them. Or I know, 20 years ago, a lot of authors are like, no, that you're not allowed to talk to the audiobook narrator, and the audiobook narrator is not allowed to talk to the author. But I love hearing it that now that people, they work together, they get to know each other. They ask instead of like, I go to this person, that person goes to this person, and that person goes to the author.
I
It's really
mean,
nice.
that's still often the case, and that's more to protect them than anybody else. Because authors, we're an anxious bunch. Like the last thing a publisher wants is an author to get all like pissy about, like, oh, you said the narrator said my this character's name wrong, blah 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 blah, and like yelling at the narrator. You don't want that.
Yeah,
So it has to come from a really strong position of like mutual respect between the author
yeah,
and the talent. So I've worked hard for that, because otherwise there's been times where, like, early in my career, when I first got the cover for The Lives of Tao, I hated it. It was this big yellow book, had black silhouettes, and I was like, this sucks. I want art. I want a beautiful portrait, of that I can like frame on my wall. I don't
right,
want graphic design. I want art. And that was one of the first lessons I learned in publishing, is that I don't know what I don't know. And my opinion about a lot of things is bad. You
right.
know, my taste for like cover art is bad, because here's what happened is, like, The Lives of Tao blew up. It sold a ton of copies. And a large part of it was probably because it was such a original cover art. It was yellow, it was bright, and just kind of popped out on the bookshelf.
Yeah,
So that was like a brilliant marketing decision. But back then, I didn't know about
yeah.
it.
You
I,
would have
I
never
just didn't
known.
know. I just wanted art. So, like, you know, sometimes there's something to be said about having subject matter experts, you know, kind of help drive certain aspects of it,
Yeah, for
of
sure.
production. Yeah.
Upcoming events, like we said, Art of Destiny is out October 10th, which for us is tomorrow. For those listening to the podcast, is today. That's air quotes for people that are watching. Uh, you're going to be at the Storycraft Cafe podcast tomorrow, correct?
We record tomorrow. I don't think it's
You
live, so I
record.
don't know when it's coming out. But yeah,
Okay.
that's
So you'll be
tomorrow.
doing stuff recording that, and then whenever that comes out is when it comes out. So go check out Storycraft Cafe. You'll be at New York Comic Con.
New York Comic Con at the
Eh,
Javits.
Are you going to be doing any panels at New York Comic Con, or you
I
just have a booth? Or
So I'm going there with Penguin Random House. I'm doing, I think, one or two panels, and I have maybe 4 or 5 signings, and we're giving away copies of The Art of Prophecy. So if any listener wants a copy and you're attending New York Comic Con, please come and get a ticket, and we're giving out copies.
awesome. Gamehole Con, you're going to be at Gamehole Con as well.
Back to the Midwest.
Back in the
Back to
Midwest.
Madison. By the way, Madison is one of my favorite towns. Like, is it a town or a city?
Madison's a city. Yeah,
It is a
Madison is
city, right?
it's the
Yeah,
capital of Wisconsin.
I
Yeah,
will give them that. Yeah, it's one of my favorite cities in the country. It's just really nice. Minneapolis and Madison are like just like really delightful places.
I know. I live hop, skip, and a jump from Minneapolis right here. And Dragon Steel is another. You'll have to tell them about that because that one's not super well known. At least not as far as I'm concerned. I don't think my audience, because I didn't know what it was until you mentioned it.
So Dragonsteel is Brandon Sanderson's convention that he has at Salt Lake City every year. So they've had it for a few years now. It is very Dragonsteel is the name of Brandon's company, and it's a very Brandon centric convention,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also where a lot of fantasy fans kind of congregate, like, and so a lot of my fantasy author friends are going to meet up there, where I'm actually going to have a table there this year. It's going to be my very first time exhibiting, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, you'll be great. You'll be great. It'll be just like today.
Yeah, but
Just like
today,
today.
yeah.
People can find you at wesleychu.com. That's WESLEY Chu. Do not put a T in there like I almost did about 30 times with autocorrect. Do not
It
put
is not
and
CHEW.
in
I,
fact, now I'm embarrassed because I say that and right on the screen, that never happened. edit that in post. Not really.
I mean, if it makes you feel better, so I actually picked my name, my I think freshman or sophomore year in high school, because I have a Taiwanese name and no one could pronounce it. And not only that, my Taiwanese name has a hyphen in the middle. So
Oh,
I don't know if anybody remembers what a scantron is.
yeah, yeah.
Am I
I
dating
remember,
myself?
but I'm
Yeah.
no. You're dating me too, so
Okay. So you can't do a dash on a scantron.
no.
So I got so many zeros on my tests back in the day because you were like, I put the dash in and the Scantron would not read it. And like, the whole thing gets spit out.
Yeah.
So I picked Wesley at one point. And in hindsight, because The Princess Bride was my favorite movie, I probably should have had a T there. As
Well,
you do.
my apologies. I caught it everywhere else except for the price that is super most important, and that's right on the live stream screen. And I'm now feeling a bit embarrassed. So, uh, but
It's all good.
wesleychu.com. They can find you on Twitter at Wes_Chu. Is
That's
that correct?
correct.
Instagram at Wesley Chu 1, the number 1, I believe.
That sounds correct. Yes.
Any other locations you want to talk about where people can find you?
I mean, the honestly, the best way to get a hold of me is on Facebook. Just look at Wesley Chu. I believe, you know, there's 4 or 5 other Wesley Chus out there in the world. One of these is I'll have to defeat them all,
Right.
take the crown, take the Wesley Chu
Take them
crown.
all.
And I have some presence on Blue Sky. And as much as I want to quit Twitter or X or Shitter or whatever it's called these days, I still have a significant presence on Twitter. So we'll see.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to get to the live stream Q&As here in a second. So if you have questions for Wesley Chu, go ahead and throw them in the chat. We will get to those as well as any comments that you guys have all made throughout the show. But first, listeners, we have some great guests coming up. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. We're going to have urban fantasy author Heather Harris is going to be joining us on October 23rd. We're also going to have Diana Jones award-winning RPG designer Connor Alexander is going to be joining us November 6th. New York Times bestselling author Michael Whitwer is going to be joining us November 20th. So you don't want to miss any of these episodes. So please follow, subscribe, rate, review, push all of the buttons on all of the medias. It helps us and helps our guests. So,
Excellent.
for Wesley Chu, I am Nick. Thank you so much for listening to Epic Realms.